Hey, what's up? David Cohen here for Learn Now Effects, and welcome back to another exciting Fusion tutorial. So in this tutorial, we're going to be making some advanced raindrop effects inside of Davinci Resolve. And let's just take a look at what we're going to be making. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go into our project settings. I'm going to set it to about 1920 by 1080 HD. Make it even smaller, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is the size of the footage, the format of the footage that you're going to be using. And I would recommend always making it the format of the footage. Like if you have full HD footage, to use full HD for your project. I'm just going to click on save, 24 frames a second. And I'm going to drag a fusion composition from the effects, or you can just right click on the media pool, click new fusion composition, 5 seconds long, and we're going to click on create and just drag this onto the timeline. Select the composition and we head on over to our fusion tab. We take our media out node all the way to the corner here, and now we're going to control and middle mouse button to get some more space. We're going to zoom out of this grid here. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in our project files, and you can get this from videocopilot.net. Big shout out to Andrew Kramer for making these files readily available for anyone who wants to make a tutorial or whoever wants to make this effect. But basically, what you would want a wide angle shot, and you would want it to be about window perspective, not like aerial view or anything like that. So here is our picture. It's about 2200 by 812. And it's 32-bit float, and so it's pretty high. We don't need to add any change depth or anything like that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab a particle emitter from here, and I'm also going to grab a particle render right away, and I'm just going to pipe this into here. Now in the particle render, what we need to do, we need to set this to 2D, and we're going to go into our image settings. In the image settings, we're going to change it to the size of the footage or the picture. Since the picture here isn't really a standard resolution at all, it's a very interesting size, very wide angle, very, yeah, very landscape oriented. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it the size of the image. I'm going to make it 2200 by 812. Oh yeah, and the first thing I should have done is uncheck auto resolution anyway, because that always gets in the way. In Fusion Standalone, it's off by default. Here it's on by default. So I'm gonna make it the size that I mentioned before. Just make it the size of your image or your footage that you're going to be using. Now, in the particle emitter, I'm going to go to region, set this to rectangle, and I'm gonna bring up the width to about the edge of the picture, and I'm also gonna bring up the height. So I'm just gonna get closer to here, and I'm gonna bring up the height. Oh, too high, too high. So I'm gonna click on Control and bring up the slider control a little bit more. So that's about it. That's what we need. All right. So we have these particles. Can't really see them much. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to Style, this paintbrush over here, and we're going to set this to Blob. Or what we can do, we can set this to Ngon, but gonna set it to something, let's set it to blob, because blob is like more random. So we can turn up the noise just a little bit, and we bring up the size to like 2. Yeah, so we have something like this. We are going to bring down the number to like 2 also, and after this we are going to add a p turbulence, sorry, a p directional force. All right, and if I add this, you're gonna see they're all gonna start falling down, but it's way too fast. We're getting a playback of like 3 frames a second, so this is too fast. I'm gonna bring down the strength to 0.01. Yeah, so we have something like this. But we still have too many particles, but a lot of them are going to not even cause anything here. You'll see in a moment what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna go here, back to the style, I'm going to go back to the style of the particles, and I'm going to bring up the size variance. So that way we have small ones, we have big ones. We don't have to create two sets of particle emitters just to get this effect. And for the random seed, I want to reseed this because to get like a more evenly distributed amount, because before we had like a lot of them on the sides and none of them in the center. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna get a background tool and I'm gonna look at it in the viewer. I'm gonna make the size of this background something like 100. No, let's make it about 150 by, oh wait, also uncheck auto resolution. Make it 150 by 150. Okay, so we have a background that's small like this one. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add a mask, a rectangle mask. And I need to right click here and I'm going to turn on options and checkered underlays on. Oh yeah, okay, so it took a while to react to that. Okay, so here's our background and here's our mask. So we're gonna go ahead and make our background white, something like this. And as you can see, the edges are already soft, and the reason is that we don't have a very high resolution image. It's only 150 by 150 pixels. So we don't really need it to be large, because the larger it is, the longer the processing time is going to be, the harder it's going to render, stuff like that. So I'm going to take this rectangle and I'm going to make it really small, make it really long and thin, something like this. And to this rectangle, I'm going to add an ellipse tool also after it. So here's our ellipse tool. And yeah, as you can see, it covered the whole rectangle. So I'm going to make the ellipse tool a lot smaller. Make the ellipse tool a lot smaller. Bring it up till we get something like this. That looks pretty nice, but we're not done yet. What we're going to do now is we're going to add a blur to this. Just regular blur. It's nothing special really, so we're going to go to blur. We can select add. Now we are going to bring up the blur size like that. But this may not look good, but you'll see in a second what I'm doing. I'm going to take a mask and I'm going to pipe it into this blur tool, and I'm going to bring the mask up like this. Make the mask small, bring it even higher up, and I'm going to turn up the soft edge. So it's going to take a while to react to that. And I can bring it down even more. I think the soft edge is a little bit too much. Just enough to make it like a smooth looking, right? Alright. So I'm going to bring this a little bit lower. That way it like gradually becomes less blurry. Okay, so that's basically it. We could have made this a little bit longer per se, like this rectangle. We could have made it like higher, like that. But it's not even gonna matter because these are just long looking raindrops. So to this, I'm going to add a displace tool. Here's our displace. I'm gonna click on add. Get a fast noise while we're at it. And in the fast noise, we wanna bring up, let's see what we can do without bringing up anything in the fast noise. I'm gonna send this to the viewer actually, because that would be a good idea. Yeah, so I have something like this. Now, in the fast noise, we want to bring down the scale. I mean, bring up the scale anyway. Yeah, and in the displace, we want to bring up the spread. Yeah, a lot. Bring the spread up a lot. Yeah, so it doesn't really look cool. So in the displace, we need to set this to XY. And I want it to refract more on the X. Something like this. I'm gonna bring the offset back. Bring the X offset to the other way. So something like this. And the fast noise, let's see. If we bring up the detail, what's gonna happen? Not much, but if we bring it down, we get something like this. It doesn't look bad. Looks quite realistic actually. And what we can do in here, in the fast noise, we can bring up the seeth rate, because rain does look weird like this. And now what we're going to do, we're going to copy this particle set. We're going to copy it. We're going to paste it here. And in the particle emitter, the second one, we're going to go to Style and select Bitmap. Now this is all going to make sense now. However, we're going to turn these funny looking shapes into actual raindrops and to make it look realistic. So we're going to look to this particle renderer, and there are a lot of these raindrops, but the only thing we need to do is we need to turn down the number. Let's make it 1, even less. We need it to be like 0.3 maybe, something like this. And they're also going to be going down like raindrops, but there's still too many. We don't really need that much. We only need one out of a few to be like this. So 0.15 should be fine. And we can reseed this again until we get evenly distributed. Alright, so that should be fine. The number variance, we turn this up, 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 up. Too much, too much. Yeah, something like this. Alright. And also back in the style, the animation is not over time. We need to set it for the particle age. That way, the display should be different on all of the particles. Okay, so those are our drops. Now to make this actually turn this into a raindrops, make them look pretty realistic, here's our image. We're going to put this down. And you can play, of course, you can play with this, bring up the size over life, play with this. Like if you would go to, yeah, we should play with that before we get anywhere else. The fade controls, we want it to fade out. That's one thing. And we want the size over life to be like small in the beginning and larger towards the end, just a little bit. No, no, sorry, that's the wrong way. That's gonna make it larger. Something like, yeah, oh no, yeah, something like this. This is gonna be small in the beginning and larger towards the end. And size to velocity, we're not gonna touch this. The color controls, it doesn't even matter. Yeah, so here are raindrops. Don't look half bad. Now to make this actually give it some depth and to actually displace our media with this, we're going to need to add a tool. Now this tool is not available on Reactor yet. It is still in beta, and well, honestly, I didn't really make this tool. I just put it into a macro. But the idea is that I asked on the WSL forum if anyone knows how to recreate this effect. And someone gave me a setup, and I was like, okay, this is a great setup. I should turn it into a macro. So I made it into a macro, and I got a lot of help from the community, and it turned out pretty cool. And this is something that I'm looking for this tutorial. So just to show you how it works, the particles need to be some bigger in order for this to work. So I'm gonna make it 3. Yeah. And the blobbiness needs to be turned down. And we have something like this. And if you zoom in closely, you won't really tell, but it's sort of like a water drop looking thing. Yeah, so I'm gonna bring down this light angle all the way here. The color doesn't really matter. You can bring up the cutaway, make it something bigger, like this. It's actually very interesting, but the shading doesn't matter now. But this is just the tool, and you can get this in the link in the description. And one way you can help develop it is you can tell me what kind of controls you would like to see here. It's still not on React as the date I'm recording this video, but there's no doesn't mean that by the time you're watching it that it's not available. So you should definitely check on Reactor before even downloading from the link in the description, because there are a few more things you're gonna need from Reactor to follow this tutorial. I'm gonna add a blob light just like this one here. And for those of you who are familiar, this is not exactly like the After Effects filter with the same name, but it does similar things. It turns images into blobs, like if I were to take a text plus. And I'm just gonna type blob. and I'm gonna make it extra bold. So I'm just gonna borrow this for a second. So the blobalize kind of needs it to be a little bit bigger just to work. So I'm gonna bring up the size and the light angle. Of course, I set it for the raindrops. I'm just gonna set it to default. So here's our blobalize, like the inverse detail, something like this. Yeah, it gets the job done. The default settings, it does something like this. And as I said, you can get this in the description below, and it'll probably be available on Reactor very soon as it's out of beta, and as soon as I get all the controls figured out. And I'd like to give a huge shout out to the WSL community and Gez and Milo Lab, Emilio Sapia, and Second and Peter Van Hout and everyone for helping me with this tool. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting tool, and I needed it for this tutorial. So that's why I thought I'd make it into a macro. So please guys, let me know how I can finish with this tool, how to make it better. I copied all the tools from the After Effects filter, but it doesn't do exactly the same because that tool, it turns the image into a blob. So if I were to put something like this in there, it would turn itself into a blob, like this. Where is it? The media in. But this one can't do that. It turns a background into a blob. It makes it a solid color. Just show you. Yeah, so this doesn't do anything much because the blobalize, I should set this to luminance. Yeah. Now, if I wanted it to work the same manner as the After Effects filter, I would have to search for Chromatic Displacement. Also, a great tool by Emilio Sapia, and we're going to be using this. We're going to be using this to create the raindrops. I'm just going to show you how this works. I'm just going to take this media in node, pipe it into the foreground, and this blobalize, oh sorry, the media in into the background and this and the blobalize into the foreground. Yeah, so it's also a macro. It takes a little bit longer to load. And after this, what I would want to do, I would want to take a channel booleans. Well, it's not exactly the same, but if I'm just saying if I wanted to recreate After Effects filter, I'd have to do this. So I'm going to set this to clear. This is just an example of how the tool works, by the way. No, not necessary in any way. And in this here, I would have to set fly mask inverted and use this media in, not the media in, use the blobalize as a mask. And in the channel booleans, we get something like this. Yeah, that's how you blobalize this image. You can turn up the blobbiness. Yeah, very interesting blob here. Turn down the detail maybe. Yeah. So anyway, this is just an example of how this works. I'm gonna take this blobalize back to where it was and get rid of these two other nodes because we don't need them yet. So I'm gonna pipe this back into the blobalize. In the blobalize, once again, blobbiness turned down, inverse detail down. So the inverse detail works that the lower it is, the more detail there is. That's why I labeled it inverse detail. And the light angle, I'll make it something sharp like this. And luminance, so it was probably should be alpha again, but I don't think it matters because there's nothing behind this. It's a transparent background. So now what we're going to do, we're going to merge these together and right click on the flow, anywhere on the flow options. I forgot to select orthogonal pipes. Grid snapping is on by default because I set that up. So I'm just going to clean up some of the tools here, make it a little bit more neat. Keep everything nice and clean. All right, so here is what we have. I can get rid of this text just to keep everything clean, the text that I created back then. Now, here's what we have. Here's our rain looking thing. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to control space bar, search for, once again, chromatic displacement. And this is a great tool by Emilio Sapia. It does, if you're familiar with the Red Giant tool with the same name, it does something very similar. Very, very cool tool. And if you're not familiar, then you can say it's a little bit like CC Glass, I'd say. But with a lot more controls, a lot more power over this stuff. So to drive this chromatic displacement, we need the media in. We need the media in to be the background and this to be the foreground. So I'm just going to move this to the corner here. Let's look at the chromatic displacement. Now, from the beginning with the default settings, it doesn't really look like rain. You can see these little streak looking things, but you can't really see it. So I'm going to bring the height up and I'm going to bring the refraction all the way to the bottom. Yeah, so it already looks like rain, as you can see. And bring up the spread just a little bit. Now, all right, so this looks pretty realistic already. So I can bring the height down just to make sure that the normals aren't crashed towards the top, because there's a bump map in here. As you can see, this already looks pretty nice. We're not done yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to get another macro, also by Emilio. So it's called Filmic Blur. It's also a really good. Oh, so I installed it twice, I can see. I wasn't sure if I installed it before starting this tutorial. So I'm just going to pipe this in here into the Filmic Blur. Also a macro, and it'll just take a while. So I'm gonna bring up the defocus size. This is like his improvement of the defocus node. And one thing I need to do, I'm gonna go here to the comments tab, and I need to apply mask inverted. I'll go here and I'll use this as a mask, the chromatic displacement. Oh, not the chromatic displacement. I'll use the blob layer as a mask. Yeah. As you can see, that looks like it's foggy outside with the rain. Yeah, so this is a little bit complicated, a lot of macros used, but we're not done yet, so I wouldn't keep your fingers crossed. So we can bring down the defocus size till it looks kind of cool. So if we were to play this plays back very well. Yeah, the playback isn't. So I'm just gonna right click here where the play stop button is, turn off high quality, turn off motion blur, turn on auto proxy, and I'm just gonna make it stop playing. All right. So one more thing, I'm going to make it very cool, like in the original Andrew Kramer's tutorial. So I'm going to take a text plus node and from the toolbar, and I'm going to select font brush, I believe. So I'm going to look at brush. There was one called brush, I'm sure of it. Brush script std. And this is a Windows, so I'm not sure what kind of font you would use if you were on Mac or Linux. I'm not sure how fonts work on the other systems. So I'm just going to type learn now fx, and I'm going to look at this in the second viewer. Pretty nice. Now, nice font. So I'm gonna search for a fuse, my favorite fuse, called X-Glow. Very cool. By Brian Ray. Very nice fuse. Very realistic fall off glow. I recommend it to anyone. It's a free fuse. All of these fuses I forgot to mention. They're all free. The Filmic Blur, the Chromatic Displacement, the X-Glow, but they all have an optional donation if you want to support the developers. So I'm just gonna bring the color to like yellow, and I'm gonna bring the gain down to make it look almost like a neon. Yeah, so I should probably click on control when I'm doing this. Yeah, and I should take this out of the viewer because it sort of slows down the playback of anything. So I'm gonna go back to the X-Glow, and this should be fine. Probably bring it probably a little bit lower. Maybe make the color just be darker. Yeah, so it's hue, lumen, saturation, I think this. Oh, so not luminance, lightness. My bad. Alright, so here's our text, and I'm going to merge this with the media in before it even goes into the chromatic displacement, and you'll see that the drops will displace that as well, will displace the text. You will see the reflection of the text inside of the drops. Oh yeah, so this was the background, so I just need a Control T. Yeah, that's my bad. Sorry. So you have this going through the drops, as you can see. Now with the Filmic Blur, what I can do is, instead of this mask, I can take a merge node. Oh, I can take a merge node, MRG, and I'm going to take this from before it goes to the Globalize, and this before it goes to the Globalize, and use this as a mask because the edges here are pretty sharp. And after this, I can also add maybe a sharpen, and yeah, the nodes are building the way they want. So I can bring up the size of this defocus now, and I can sharpen this. All right, so we have this sort of rain looking effect. Now in the beginning, we're going to go to the first keyframe here, and we are going to go to the Filmic Blur, keyframe the defocus size. Oh, keep clicking to animate this. So, sorry. What I should be doing is clicking this as the best. And you can also play with the lens type. You can, let's see, let's go back to a frame. All right, so what to keyframe this? So we should go probably to frame, I don't know, 48 maybe. Go to frame 48 once all of this loads, just a second. All right, so we should play with the lens type until we get something more satisfactory. It looks kind of foggy anyway. Yeah, so this might not be the problem. Let's play with the gain. We can also change this to anamorphic. That would make it interesting. Yeah, so that kind of cleaned up the edges a little bit. So what else I'm gonna do is the second image in the project files that I will provide the link to in the description is this prints, or these prints. So if we look at this, it makes the glass look a little dirty. Send this to the viewer. I thought I'd do. Second. All right, so here the prints don't look pretty at all. It makes the glass look kind of dirty. So I'm just gonna merge this over it. Control T, merge that over here. And I'm gonna bring the merge size up like this. And I'm gonna set it to screen. And I'm gonna bring the gain down. Yeah. I wonder what would have happened if I would have just merged it before the chromatic displacement, before any of this displacement even happens. I'm just gonna shift this out just to check. I haven't tried this, so I just want to see. Oh, and this is playing, so I should probably make it stop. Yeah, it went into the mask input accidentally. So let's see how this looks. Something like this. And if I were to put this into the chromatic displacement now, I think it would have more of a 3D look. Let's just see. Nah, it was better the other way around. Sorry for the trouble like that. So here's our finished result. Looks kind of interesting. Rain. So there are a lot of things you can play with, maybe to clean up the edges. It looks kind of foggy right now. And I don't like this dirty glass. This is just for people who want it to look super realistic. But I'm not sure how much this actually applies, how many times you're going to need this, but it's actually a pretty cool effect, pretty good exercise. So if we go forward to the time where the blur is supposed to fade out already, yeah, we did it at 48, so let's go to 46. Yeah, so let's see the filmic blur. We still have those keyframes, right? No? No keyframes? How's that? Go to frame 0. Do we have the keyframe? Yeah, we have the keyframe. So I was supposed to go to 48 and bring this to 0. You know, maybe not 0, maybe just something a little bit less. That's an interesting. What happened? Chromatic displacement, the light power, probably something happened here. Alright, here it is. This is what we were going for. I don't know how that happened before. So this is our effect, and one last thing before we send this to the media out node, even though we can do that now. Oh, here it is. So what we're going to do now is we are going to open the spline window. Still looking for it here. Alright, so the Filmic Blur, we're just gonna, oh, a lot of stuff in there. So I'm just gonna make it fit. And this is the animation that we made from frame 0 to frame 48. So I'm just gonna click Shift S, easy ease in, easy ease out. Alright, so that was the only thing we animated actually. So it looks pretty cool. This is our animation. And I hope you guys like this. And if you're new to this channel, please subscribe and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever we release a new tutorial. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks.